Have you ever forgotten the base plate of your tripod at home? If that's ever happened to you, go ahead and hit that like button. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss out on future videos. So I'm gonna be honest with you guys, camera comparisons nowadays to me are really boring. I mean, let's be honest, it's 2021. You can pick up just about any camera and the image quality is going to be very good. And it's gonna have all the features, or most at least, to be able to tell your story. I think what matters most is what features are important to you and your workflow. So I got together with my buddy Griffin Conway, who's a filmmaker out of Orange County, to compare two of the hottest cameras available today in 2021, which is the Canon C70 and the Sony FX3. And we wanted to compare these two cameras to find out their strengths and weaknesses. Now, this video isn't to declare a winner per se, but rather provide information to you guys in case you're interested in buying one for yourself. So let's go ahead and start off with the build quality and ergonomics of this camera. The Sony FX3 is made out of this magnesium alloy body, which feels very solid, it's comfortable to hold, and it is very lightweight. It also comes with a removable top handle, giving you two full-size XLR inputs and 4 channels of audio recording. The C70, on the other hand, is much larger in size and chunkier. The body itself is made out of a similar material that you see on most Canon cameras, which is a very strong plastic. Kind of reminds me of a DSLR with a battery grip, or like a 1DX type of camera. It's not as easy to hold as the FX3, but like the FX3, it does come with a top handle, which does help with the overall ergonomics. I will say the FX3 feels better built and more robust in comparison to the Canon C70. So one thing I noticed about the C70, it seems somewhat a little bit like cheaply built, in particular the screen to display. I know you told me to be careful because you have a shoot tomorrow, but like,
you can do one more. Right?
Look at this. It just, I feel like it's gonna break.
Yeah.
In comparison to like this thing is, I mean, you go ahead and you could try this one.
I'm gonna just, no, I'm kidding.
So what has been your experience with it? Is that, you guys have 3 C70s, right? Is that the case with all of them?
It is, yeah. So don't get me wrong, like it's a great camera, I love it. But in terms of build quality specifically, compared to the other Canon cameras, like we've had a lot. We have the 1DX Mark III, we have 4 C200s, and those things are just total workhorses. We've had 4 of them, and all of them have at least 1,000 hours on them. There's never been into service one time. Literally everything's perfect. Never do anything to them, just leave them there, and they work. With the C70, like Armando mentioned, the screen is a little rickety. This weekend I was shooting with one of the DZO lenses. It's a little bit bigger, and I noticed I don't know if you can pick this up or not, but the top handle rotates from the body. There's like a little bit of play there. Whereas with the C200, it's got a couple mounting points. It's just much more solid. It's still a great camera, but in my opinion, it's a camera that should probably live in a cage. So I do have a cage on order coming for this, but in the meantime, in the stock configuration, it's not something I'm wild about the build quality.
Now, both of these cameras offer incredible video quality. I don't think anybody's gonna be upset with the image coming out of any of these cameras because they're both fantastic. Both of these cameras also can be pushed really hard, and you can overexpose or even underexpose by 2 or 3 stops and still have usable footage. Now, both of these cameras offer really great recording options internally. However, the FX3 is able to record in RAW externally using a recorder, which is actually something that can be extremely useful in a situation where a RAW workflow is needed. Now, the C70's max recording capabilities are 10-bit 422, which is nothing to apologize because it is extremely capable when you're video editing. In fact, because it offers a dual gain output sensor, recovering those shadows or highlights when you're color grading sometimes feels easier to do with the C70 over the FX3. So one of the things with the Sony FX3 is that it records in UHD as opposed to the Canon C70 in DCI. However, whenever you're using an Atomos recorder, it does record in 4.2K, which is kind of nice because I kind of prefer that. So just keep that in mind. I feel like not a lot of people know that. Now, when it comes to quick turnaround and web delivery, both of these cameras offer something different. The Sony FX3 has a picture profile called S-Cinetone, which was derived from Sony's flagship camera, the Venice. This picture profile looks great right out of the box and doesn't require much color grading at all. Now the C70 doesn't have a picture profile like S-Cinetone, but they do have something that is really cool. They allow you to input your own LUTs and bake them into your own footage, which I actually like because in a situation like this, where I'm doing a talking head, I can build a LUT and I can actually import this into the camera, and now I don't have to worry about later editing or color grading in post. This can be extremely useful and save you a ton of time. Now, one of the reasons why you'd want to buy a Sony FX3 or a Canon C70 is because they offer really good autofocus. Now, I've always been a fan of Canon's dual pixel autofocus. It just feels very organic. It feels very natural, like somebody's actually pulling focus. But for whatever reason on the Canon C70, it doesn't feel as smooth as other Canon cinema cameras. In fact, we did a side-by-side comparison using both 24-70 native lenses on each camera, and what we've realized is on the FX3, things just work smoother, they locked in much faster. Now, if you underexpose or if you have darker complexion, the C70 didn't even work at all. Something else to note is that the Sony FX3 does have eye autofocus, where the Canon C70 doesn't. And I find that interesting because the Canon R5, which is a much cheaper camera, does have eye autofocus, and it works phenomenally well. So if you're a one-man show or you're constantly flying your camera on a gimbal and you heavily rely on autofocus, I would say the FX3 is probably going to give you better results than the Canon C70. However, under normal lighting conditions, both of these cameras perform really well. The C70 does have a feature that I really love, which is face-only tracking. That's where if the camera doesn't detect the face, it will automatically lock focus and remain there until it sees a face again. Now, both of these cameras offer some form of image stabilization. The Sony FX3 has in-body image stabilization, meaning that the camera sensor itself is slightly moving to counteract any camera shake. Now, the Sony FX3 also has the ability to capture the gyro data from the footage that was recorded and later stabilize it even further in post-production using Sony's Catalyst software. Now, the C70 doesn't have a sensor stabilization. It offers an electronic 5-axis stabilization, which means that it does everything in camera. The drawback with that is that you're going to get a cropped image, but the benefit is that you don't have to worry about it in post. But let's compare them and see how they look side by side. So in order to test these cameras at the same time, we mounted them together and we used the same native lenses respectively on both cameras. On the C70, we also used a speed booster to match the field of view of the FX3, since technically the FX3 is a full frame camera. Now, this is what the FX3 looks like straight out of the camera using IBIS with no post stabilization at all. And this is what the C70 looks like straight out of the camera, also with no post stabilization. Now, this is what they look like side by side, and as you can see, the C70 is cropped in a little bit more because it's stabilizing in camera, and it does seem to look a bit more stable. But since we have the gyro data on the FX3, what if we were to take that into the Catalyst software and stabilize it in post? What would it look like? And that's exactly what I did. I took it into Catalyst Browse, set it to 90% to match the crop of the C70, and this is what it looks like now. The difference is night and day, but more importantly, we have control of our framing. In other words, if we want to stabilize it more, it's going to crop in a little bit more. If we want to stabilize it less, we'll have more real estate. Now, here's what the FX3 stabilized looks like compared to Canon's built-in electronic stabilization. Having that gyro data makes a big difference, and even if we try to add warp stabilizer to the Canon C70 to make it a little bit more smoother, it still isn't as smooth as the FX3. Now, both of these cameras offer special features, an X factor that may or may not be important to you. And I've already mentioned some. For example, the FX3 can record in RAW externally, where the Canon C70 cannot. The C70 is capable of recording in a DCI format, where the FX3 internally can only do UHD. Unless you're using a recorder, then you can do 4.2K. The FX3 has 2 full-size XLR inputs, where the C70 requires a mini XLR adapter. The C70 has built-in ND filters, the FX3 does not. The FX3 is a true full-frame camera, where the Canon C70 is Super 35. Now, Canon does sell an adapter that gives you a full-frame field of view. It is $600 and also requires you to now use EF lenses. And of course, this also adds more money to your camera package, but it is an option. Now the C70 does offer more cinema style features like shutter angle, time code, true 24 frames per second, and just other things that you won't find on the FX3 despite its cinema line badging. Now at the time of filming this video, the Sony FX3 is $3,898, where the Canon C70 is $5,499, excluding any additional accessories like the Canon Speed Booster, making the Sony FX3 a bit more affordable. And like I said at the beginning of the video, there is no true clear winner. What's more important are what features matter to you. Now there's still a lot more to learn about these cameras. For example, how do the slow motion compare to each other? What happens if you take a Canon lens and you adapt it to a Sony camera? A lot more things. Head on over to Griffin's channel. I'll leave a link down below to his video where we continue this conversation. Let me know, are you guys team Canon, team Sony? Keep it civil in the comment section. My name is Armando. Thanks again for watching, and you will catch me in the next one. Adios.